What was that? Question? You good? Okay. So far, the key skill, the key thing you need to know, and if you get this, everything I do for the next few days should be not just making sense, it should almost be, oh, I never thought of that, but now that you showed me that, that seems obvious, if I've done my job right. You have to be able to name the triangles, naming the sides. You have to be able to label triangles. What are the three sides? Opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So it says, fill in the appropriate names in the blank. I put a little alpha right here, so color in this angle. This is the angle we're talking about. This side right here that my little eraser cursor is hovering over, opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. Let's put a little H there. What about the one at the bottom here, opposite or adjacent? Adjacent. Let's put a little A there. And that leaves us with opposite over here. Also, we have learned how to use a calculator to find the sine or the cosine if we know the angle, or go backwards if we don't know the angle. So use a calculator, it says, to find the following. Find the sine of 35 degrees to 4 decimal places. By the way, if I don't say, let's decide from now on, if I'm asking you to find the sine or the cosine or the tangent, we'll go to 4 decimal places, unless I say different. Sine 35, do you all get 0.5736? I encourage you during this lesson, follow along on your calculator, because one of the skills you need to actually just pick up is physically getting faster on your calculator because you know where buttons are. Find the cosine of 15. I got 0.9659. Yeah? Now this is not, C is not saying find the tangent of 3.145. It's saying the tangent of a mystery angle was 3.145. How do I do that? Shift or second function or inverse. Can I just call that shift or second function? In fact, I'll probably call it shift from now on, okay? That top left, it's colored often on a calculator key. Mine's yellow. Most of them tend to be yellow. Second function tangent of, yoink, 3.145, and the angle that came from is 72 degrees. Now we're going to put it all together. We're going to take Pythagoras, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and we're going to add a very, very useful tool, Trig, SOHCAHTOA Trig, that acronym that we came up with last day, to solve triangles. To solve for a missing side or angle, or it says solve for missing angle or side or angle, really just solve for missing angle or side in a triangle, there are 3 steps. Label. O, A, and H. What does the O stand for? What does the A stand for? Adjacent. What does the H stand for? So label the triangle. Then figure out the trig ratio. We had an acronym. What was the acronym? Let's write that in here. That's what we're going to use. In fact, I'm going to suggest that for the rest of this lesson, anytime you turn the page, this is the first thing you write at the top of the page. And then it says solve. There's going to be 2 types of questions. Draw a little line right down the middle. If you're finding a side, you're going to end up cross multiply. Ing. If you're finding an angle, shift button. Jordan, that's all very abstract. The easiest way is to jump in and just get tricky with it. Let's try some. Example 1 says solve for the missing side or angle. So the first thing I would say is there a right angle in this triangle? Is there a 90-degree angle? Yeah. I'm teaching you this year what's called right angle trig. Works for triangles that are right angled, which is a lot of them and very useful. Next year you'll learn non-right angle trig. You'll learn a couple of more rules, but then that's it. So, and what are they asking me to find? Side or an angle? Side. How do you know? Because that's where the X is. Okay. Let's label the side. Now, can you see which angle they gave me? Which one did they give me, Amber? The 18. You know what? So it stands out. I always just tend to color it in like that. It takes 1 second. Now let's label the sides. But I'm only going to label the sides that have stuff on them. The long slanty side, the hypotenuse, is blank. I'm going to leave it blank. That X, what is it? Opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Let's put an O here. What's the 15? Adjacent. Now, I do see some teachers, when they teach trig, they tell their kids, always label all 3 sides. Don't write this down. There's a reason I leave that blank. I think if you put the H there, it just don't write that down. If you put the H there, I think it became more confusing. Leave the blank side blank, and I'll show you why. What's our magic acronym? What's our magic word? SOHCAHTOA. What 2 letters do I have on my triangle? O and A. Which trig function has the O and the A in it? Alex. If I'd put that H there, I'd have to think a bit more. I'd have to say, well, ignore that H. That's why I don't like writing it there. I think it just confuses things. What did you say? You're right. Write down the trig function, tan. See how we got that? Because O and A are in the SOHCAHTOA. Yes? What always goes next to the trig function? Always the angle. What's the angle here, Amber? Yeah, nice and loud. That's why I went back. You answered that earlier. Equals. What did the OA actually stand for? In the word TOA, what did the OA stand for? Opposite over adjacent. Look at my triangle. What's the opposite side? X. Over. What's the adjacent side? You know what? If I do this, it's just like question 5 from last day's homework. I have 1 fraction equals 1 fraction. You know how I can solve this? There's a handy-dandy Math 8 trick. Oh, I thought I was going to have to scroll back. Yeah, what? Cross multiply. I'll draw a little arrow because it's not actually an equal sign. I'm doing a mathematical operation. And Curtis, when I cross multiply, I'm going to go this way. X times 1. Hey, what is X times 1 or 1 times X? Just plain old? Equals. And when I multiply diagonally the other way, it's going to be 15 times the tan of 18. And I'm just going to write 15 tan 18. Is the X by itself? Then go to your calculator and type in 15. You may have to go times tan 18, or if you have a good calculator, you may even be able to type 15 tan 18. My calculator and some of yours require me to go 15 tan 18, close off a bracket because it automatically opens a bracket after the trig function. Just figure out how yours works, and this is why Curtis and this is why Greg have been saying, bring your own calculator, please, and get used to how it works, because I will not, on the day of the test, teach you how yours works. Instead, I'll just laugh at you. Do we all get 4.87? Ta-da! Found the missing side. B. B. Can you see which angle they gave me, Sam? Which one? In B, which angle did they tell me? Let's color a little, make it stand out. Let's label the 2 sides that have things on them. The X, what's that? Opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Put a little H there. By the way, Greg, my friend, this step, this labeling, even when you get good, is always worth doing. I encourage you, don't reach the point where you do all the trig in your head. Always label the triangles. It takes all of 1 second or less, and it almost always eliminates every mistake, Jordan. Hey, what's the 3? Opposite or adjacent? What 2 letters do I have? Ah! Look at the word SOHCAHTOA. Ah! Which trig function? got to be cos. You see how we figured that out okay? That's why that SOHCAHTOA acronym is so handy, right? It's the only one that's got the A and the H in it. What always goes next to the trig function? I'm going to be fussy. The angle, because when you said the degree, it may be a variable, in which case there is no degrees symbol there. But for now, the angle. Then there's an equal sign. Cosine is what over what? According to adjacent over hypotenuse. Or in this case, specifically, what over what? 3 over x. By the way, do you notice the slight difference between this equation and the previous one in terms of where the x is? Where is the x in this equation? On the bottom. Kira, when you're doing trig, there's only two possibilities when you're finding a side. The x is going to be on the top or the x is going to be on the bottom. You may notice patterns, shortcuts, so that you can actually skip the cross multiplying and go straight to the answer. And if you notice that in your homework, I give you permission. On a test or a quiz, will I always show work to avoid doing mistakes? Absolutely. I gave you a hint as to how you're going to solve this. The grade 8 mathematical operation or trick, what are we going to do? Cross multiply. Now this time when I cross multiply, can you see, Tyler, it's going to be 3 times 1, or in your head, what is 3 times 1? I agree. Equals, and when you cross multiply, it's going to be x times cos 56. And Tyler, all I'm going to write is x cos 56. Have I got the x by itself? Let's do that. What's happening right there between the x and the cos? Multiplying. So how will I move the cos over? Divide. So you're saying I'm going to go divide by cos 56, divide by cos 56, and on this side they'll cancel. I will have the x by itself, and apparently x is going to be 3 divided by the cosine of 56, which is what? Oh, by the way, look at my picture. The hypotenuse, is that the longest side? I know my answer has to be bigger than 3. I already know that. Oh, and since it's a side, I know it's going to be positive because there's no such thing as a side that's -5 long. We don't do that in the real world. So there are some built-in error checks too. What do you got? 5.36. Rounded off properly? 5.36? That's all I can ask you to do in terms of finding a side. It's either going to be on the bottom or the top of the trig function. I'll give you I'll give you one of opposite adjacent hypotenuse, and I'll give you an x somewhere. Mr. Dueck, what if you had 2 sides? You can use Pythagoras, which we already done. What about finding an angle? Next page. C. Brady, can you see what angle did they give me that they want me to stare at or look at? They didn't put a number there, but can you see which angle they want me to focus on? Oh, I haven't given it a name. What letter was that? It's a Greek letter. It's a Greek letter alpha, but can you see the bottom right angle, yes? Let's just put a little hash mark right there. That's what we're focusing on. They gave me 2 sides, yes? Let's label the 2 sides. Hey, the 11, what's that? Opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Opposite. Across from, opposite. What about that 12, adjacent or hypotenuse? Long, skinny side, the one across from the 90, hypotenuse. Did you guys turn the page? Okay, I did. Which trig function? Sin is when you swear in my class. Sin is when you call it sin instead of sine. Sine. Kira, what always goes next to the trig function? The angle. What's the angle this time? It's a variable. The little fish symbol. Equals. What over what? O, right? As O over H, 11 over 12. Here we're not going to cross multiply. Here we need to find an angle. Ooh, how did we find an angle? Did you hear her? Shift. She said, yeah, shift. Now, got to be careful. All of you get your calculators out. I'm going to make a little note here. Use shift. On your calculator, when you go second function or shift sign, you have to do an open bracket if your calculator does not. Because you want to type in 11 opposite over hypotenuse. And if you don't put the whole thing in brackets, it'll only do the shift sign of 11. It won't know that you want that over 12 to be shift signed as well. Oh, and if you have a cheap calculator, you might have to go 11 divided by 12 equals and then second function sign. Do you? Yeah. No? You do. Yeah. Hey, what angle has an opposite over hypotenuse of 11 over 12? 66.4, 66 degrees. How would I get you to show work? In all honesty, it's a little, well, erase that. In all honesty, it's a little tricky. I would go like this, boom, and I would just say alpha equals. It's all calculator work. Okay. It's a bit of a fib. Do you notice on my calculator, and maybe on yours, a little -1 appears next to the sign? If I was fussy, here's really what I would say. Alpha equals the inverse sign. That little symbol -1 is a symbol for shift or inverse of 11 over 12. I'm not fussy, but just in case you see that somewhere written as work, you'll know what the heck it means. It means they hit the shift button of sign with an 11 over 12 inside the brackets, and they got 66 degrees back. Trig was made for applications. So I wrote down here, hey, let's try some, I called them easy. That may be insulting because they're somewhat tricky, but they're not as bad as you think. Word problems. When doing word problems, remember, I'm telling you every time, draw a picture. Oh, and not only that, in the picture, you know what shape is going to appear somewhere in the picture? A right angle triangle, guarantee it. Then label ratio solve. Oh, I need to give you some terminology. One of the terms that they're going to use is angle of elevation. An angle of elevation is you raise your eyes. If they give you an angle of elevation, you imagine Sam standing at that location and raising your eyes through the angle of elevation. It's this one. And then there's another term. It's called the angle of depression. When you're depressed, you look like this. Look at me. And that's the motion for the angle of depression. You lower your eyes to sweep through the angle. Say what? It'll become clearer in a second. Let's do an example. An observer standing 3.5 meters away from a flagpole measures an angle of elevation of 63 degrees to the top of the pole. Find the height of the flagpole. We should draw a picture first. Flagpole. Person. Triangle. All right, Brody. Flag. Fine. Jordan, what do they want me to find in this question? Which is the height in this question? I'm going to hold my eraser over each side one at a time. You tell me which is the height. Is this the height? Is this the height? Is this the height? Hey, let's put a variable there. X, you say? Sure. You could use H for height, except H also stands for hypotenuse. I stay away from H. They must have given us something else. I see that 3.5. 3.5 meters away from the flagpole. 3.5, is that going to go on the slanty side, or is that going to go on the horizontal, shorter side? And then they gave me an angle of elevation, which is from the ground up. You know what? They're talking about that angle here. Okay. Is that okay? That's a 63 degrees, because it's in your question. It says 63 degrees in the word problem, dear. I didn't worry about making it neat because it was right in front of you if you looked. Just saying. Ashley, joy of my heart, let's label this triangle. This X opposite adjacent, by the way, you can see I clearly know which angle we're talking about. It's the one I labeled it. That X opposite adjacent or hypotenuse? Convince me. Oh, Simi whispered what? Why is it opposite? What does the word opposite mean? Across from, facing. Yoink. See it? That's opposite. So let's put a little O here. That 3.5, what's that? Which trig function? Tan. What always goes next to the trig function? The angle, what's the angle this time? Variable, oh no, they gave it to me. What is it, Kira? 63 degrees equals opposite over adjacent equals what over what? This is called, by the way, indirect measurement. You're measuring the height of something without having to climb it. I'm telling you, if you replace the word flagpole with Mount Everest or mountains, and you replace the word observer with geographer or map maker, this was glorious. This meant you could figure out how high mountains and canyons were without having to climb or descend into the stupid things. This was map making 101. Now we have GPS and satellites, but really until the 1960s, this was it. Right? Good, find X. $6.87? No, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Kites. I don't know if you ever go to downtown Vancouver, right by Kitsilano, by Vanier Park on weekends, there's almost always some people flying stunt kites that know how to make them move and things. And one of the things you might want to know is, how high is my kite? An easy thing to measure on a kite is how much string you've let out. Because you have a nice little spool, good kite kits actually will measure that for you. So, a kite is flown with 210 meters of string. The angle of elevation, which is fairly easy to measure, is 61 degrees. How high is the kite? Let us draw a picture. Kite. What would the string look like when you fly a kite? Marcus? Slanted down? Is that what you... In fact, I think it's going to be the hypotenuse. Yeah? That's going to be the hypotenuse. String. Now, in real life, string curves a little bit. We're going to pretend the string is exactly straight. Real life, the string hangs, but, yeah. Oh, I think I can draw a triangle. Where would I put that 210? Right here? It says the angle of elevation is 61 degrees. Angle of elevation is from the ground up. Sam, what are they asking me to find? Am I going to put my x here along the ground or here? Here? Let's label our sides. Oh. All right, Brody, I can see it. Mr. Dueck, put a little red tail on the kite. Fine. Got your red flag on the previous one. Got your little red tail here. Hey, the x, opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? The 210, adjacent or hypotenuse? Kira, which trig function? Ah, she learned. Kira, what always goes next to the trig function, dear? Which is going to be 61 degrees. And what does sine equal? What over what? More specific, in this triangle, what over what? Hey, this is a job for cross multiplying. I get about 184 meters. 183 point something, something, something. Yeah? And I didn't need to somehow climb up there to measure it. Mr. Dueck is standing on an observation tower 30 meters above the ground. And he sees, what's that? Okay, good point. Cross out the word Ryan first of all. Sure, Greg. And for some reason, because I yoinked this question from my friend Mr. Abel, I forgot to change his last name in the second one. You can make that Dueck again and I'll remember. Oh, Greg. So now that Greg has been kind enough to model this for us, let's draw a little picture. So let's put our little observation tower right there. There's G for Greg. Here's D for Dueck. Now the angle that, if I draw a little line, like this, the angle that they want me to find is this one, and I'll use the Greek letter theta, that 0 with the belt. That's the angle of depression. Let's see if we can now label some stuff. Mr. Dueck is standing on an observation tower 30 meters above the ground. Okay, so how far from here to here? Now that's 30 in the black bottom triangle. Is there some way that I could move that 30 into the red upper triangle? Which one, Kira? You nodded your head. How far from here to here? How far from here to here? Oh, you know what? I can put the 30 over here too because it's a nice straight line. Yes? Is that okay, Ty? And then it says Greg is standing 120 meters away from the base of the tower. Well, the base of the tower is right there. 120 meters away. Oh, I think that would be this distance, but that's in the black bottom triangle. Is there a way that I could somehow move that number or figure something out? Oh, on the top, you're saying this is 120? Okay. Little bit tricky, but when you see it, once you see the correct diagram, in fact, as soon as I modeled it, I heard Brody back there go, oh! And you saw the triangle, it suddenly flipped in your head, and you said, oh, you want that one up there. Oh, Brody, that 30 opposite, there's my angle, that 30 opposite adjacent or hypotenuse. Nice. What about that 120? Which trig function? Tangent? What always goes next to the trig function? The angle, which in this case is a variable, theta. I'm using Greek, and get used to it because next year you will almost exclusively. Suck it up and learn some new letters. Equals what over what? Well, it's opposite over adjacent, but in this triangle, what over what? 30 over 120. Am I cross multiplying this time? Oh, what am I going to do? Good, find the angle.
Mr. Dueck, can we test this?
Oh, I wish. You get 14 degrees. Theta equals 14 degrees. What's your homework? Number one. Now, number one is just like we did actually last day. It's saying find the ratio in fraction form. I haven't given you the angle, so cosine of m is just going to be the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse, what over what. Don't need to worry about the shift button or anything yet. I didn't say find the angle, I just said find the ratio. However, number two, all. It says for each of them, find the indicated side or angle. Label the triangle sides, OA and H. Write the trig ratio, and then solve the angle or the side to one decimal place. Number three, it says, for each of the following word problems, sketch a good diagram. I'll give you a hint. Your diagram's going to have a triangle in it, which has all the information labeled on it, including the missing side or angle. Write the trig ratio. Solve. Then it says, write a sentence which tells what you solve for. Meh. Just put a box around your answer and I'll clue in. 3A is good. I may end up doing all of 3, but let me see. Yeah, 3B is good. Yeah, 3C is good. Yeah, D is good. Yeah, E is good. I think this is the one that I didn't like. Let me just read. Maybe there's tall. Angle depression for the how far from the... No, I fixed it. Never mind. I made it clearer. H is good. I skipped G. I is good. J is good. And there are your answers. You know what? You'll finish the homework with plenty of time to spare, but I think that's good enough for practice, so we're good.